Here we are once again, my brothers and sisters. I want to welcome you to another Living Hope Today study. Thank you for being here once again. Today we find ourselves in the book of Exodus, chapter 27. We are watching as God lays out the instructions, the very, very specific instructions to Moses, to his community, about how he wants his tabernacle built, with exact measurements, with exact materials, with embroidery, with skillful metallurgy. I mean, God is being so specific here. And what is he doing? Why does this mean so much to him? Well, we might say, that this is going to be the place, the center of the Israelites' worship, and it needs to be considered holy. It needs to be considered precious, set apart, not ordinary. We're not talking about just going over to some pile of rocks and making a pillar and worshiping God as the pillar like maybe some of the pagan nations do. No, God's specifically drawing out his holiness and his power and his uniqueness among all the pagan nations as he instructs his people to build this beautiful, portable tabernacle to receive his worship. Now, we're going to start with a little review today. First, let's look at the first thing God told us about in chapter 25. It was the Ark of the Covenant. It was made of acacia wood. It was overlaid with pure gold. It's only 4.5 feet long, 2.25 feet wide, 2.25 feet high. It was a symbol of the presence and glory of God, and God makes sure that they understand, put my law in this ark. This is to be where I'll meet with you. This is to symbolize my presence, and this is to be very, very precious. God also in 25 commissioned the building of the table of showbread, but he doesn't really say too much about what it's going to be used for, except for something called the bread of the presence, which we'll see more about later. He also commissions the construction of the golden lampstand that has 7 flames on it, representing that perfection, purity, holiness. Again, we'll find out more about that even today in chapter 27. Just to bring you back to the whole big picture of this, I want to take you over here and just show you this area here. This would be Ezekiel's temple. Okay, this is huge, huge. Okay, this is Herod's temple, the temple that Herod built. Okay, over here in this little box right here, this is the tabernacle that we're talking about here. It'll fit. This is an American football field by comparison. It takes up maybe 1/4, maybe not even that much, maybe an eighth, in fact, of a football field. So it is portable. All right, well, as God would have it, we saw the design of his tabernacle, the entrance over here. You see the tables. There's an altar right here. We're going to get to that today. And then this is the place where it contains the Holy of Holies. It contains the actual Ark of the Covenant. We'll see more about that today too, but that's what God's commissioned so far. Now let's look at verse 1 of chapter 27. Build an altar of acacia wood, 3 cubits high. It is to be square, 5 cubits long, 5 cubits wide. Okay, remember a cubit's about 18 inches. We're building an altar. Listen to this. Make a horn at each of the 4 corners, so that the horns and the altar are one piece. Overlay the altar. Instead of gold, now we have bronze. God continues his commission. He says, make all its utensils of bronze, its pots to remove the ashes, and its shovels, sprinkling bowls, meat forks, and fire pans. Make a grating for it, a bronze network, and make a bronze ring at each of the 4 corners of the network. Put it under the ledge of the altar so that it is halfway up the altar. make poles of acacia wood for the altar and overlay them with bronze. All right, listen, it goes on. The poles are to be inserted into the rings, so they will be on two sides of the altar when it is carried. Again, God's making everything portable. Make the altar hollow out of boards. It is to be made just as you were shown on the mountain. I want you to remember, God's instruction has already been clearly given to Moses as he spent 40 days on Mount Sinai talking to God himself. God has laid out his plan. So what is this altar? Well, it's called the altar of burnt offering. There you see an artist's rendering of what God has just commissioned. Why do we need this? Well, let's think about this. The altar is the first thing encountered as you enter into the tabernacle area. Okay, there's a reason for that we're about to get to. What's happening on this altar? Innocent life, the life of the animals, is being sacrificed. Why? It's symbolizing the fact that innocent life dies for guilty to bring atonement, that the sins of the people must be paid for. The animal, in this case, is slaughtered, sacrificed. That innocent, sinless blood is then spilled out on behalf of the people. All right. And then this is also the burnt offering place. The entire animal is burnt. It's symbolic of total surrender, of us being totally consumed in the sense that our sin has been removed. All right. And what this really does is it foreshadows the sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice of the Lamb of God. Let me take you to the New Testament for a minute just to bring this home to us a little bit. In Hebrews 10, and by that will we have been made holy through the sacrifice of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all. The Lamb of God is sacrificed ultimately on the cross of Calvary, and the shed blood of the Lamb of God is the blood that is capable of receiving the punishment of all of our sin. The wrath of God is poured out on Jesus. Our sin is punished in that moment as that sacrifice is made. So go back to Exodus 27. What do you see? You see that God is instituting a sacrificial system that is going to point for centuries to the cross. You get to Hebrews, the cross is over, the resurrection has occurred, the ascension has occurred, the church has begun. But Hebrews takes us back and says, wait a minute, think about how that sacrifice fulfills what was happening all through the Old Testament. Day after day, every priest stands and performs his religious duties again and again. He offers the same sacrifices. In other words, this sacrificial system has been in place for centuries. The priests have been slaughtering animals at the temple for hundreds and hundreds of years, but they can never take away sin. Why? Because they're symbolically pointing to the cross. It shows you God's plan of salvation is right here in Exodus 27, right in the middle of it. But when this priest had offered for all time one sacrifice for sins, what priest is that? That's Jesus. Notice that the New Testament lets us understand that Jesus is not only the sacrifice, the Lamb of God, he is also the priest that lays his own life down on behalf of the people. And when he offers himself as a sacrifice, now this sacrifice is unique. It covers sin, past, present, and future. It pays the price, receives the wrath for all sin of all time. We don't have to sacrifice bulls and goats and lambs and pigeons and doves anymore. Why? Because the ultimate sacrifice, by the time you get to Hebrews 10, it's already happened in the person of Jesus. Jesus does what? He sits down at the right hand of God. Since that time, he waits for his enemies to be made his footstool. Now that sin and death have been conquered through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we're simply waiting for the culmination of the age when God says, that's enough, and evil is completely eliminated for all time, and the new heaven and the new earth are created, and they begin with the people of God rejoicing in God forevermore. But look at this verse in verse 14, because by one sacrifice, okay, that's the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, God has made perfect forever those who are being made holy. The people that are coming to Jesus Christ by faith have been covered in the righteousness of Jesus Christ and are therefore perfect forever through his righteousness, not because we're good, but because he's perfect and he has covered us with his righteousness. Okay, we still are being made holy. We still face the struggles of having a sinful nature and trying to live lives that honor God. But nonetheless, God's plan is in place. God's sacrifice is sufficient and effective, efficacious, as the theologians would say. And what happened? Those who come to Jesus Christ are saved from the wrath of God because their sin has already been punished through the death of Jesus on the cross. That whole sacrificial moment in God's plan of salvation is being foreshadowed here in the book of Exodus. That's what's happening. God moves on in this chapter to give us more things he wants. He says, make a courtyard for the tabernacle. The south side should be 100 cubits long and is to have curtains of finely twisted linen with 20 posts and 20 bronze bases, and with silver hooks and bands on the posts. The north side shall also be 100 cubits long and is to have curtains with 20 posts and 20 bronze bases, and with silver hooks and bands on the posts. What detail? What detail? The west end of the courtyard should be 50 cubits. So now we're making a rectangle, right? 100 by 50. The west end of the courtyard shall have 50 cubits wide and have curtains with 10 posts and 10 bases. On the east end toward the sunrise, the courtyard shall also be 50 cubits wide. Curtains 15 cubits long are to be on one side of the entrance with 3 posts and 3 bases, and curtains 15 cubits long are to be on the other side with 3 posts and 3 bases. For the entrance to the courtyard, provide a curtain 20 cubits long of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn and finely twisted linen, the work of an embroiderer, with 4 posts and 4 basins. All the posts around the courtyard are to have silver bands and hooks and bronze bases. The courtyard shall be 100 cubits long and 50 cubits wide, with curtains of finely twisted linen 5 cubits high, and with bronze bases. Listen, all the other articles used in the service of the tabernacle, whatever their function, including all the tent pegs for it, and those for the courtyard, are to be of bronze. God is sparing no detail. This is how I want the tabernacle to be. And here it is. Again, this print's probably too small for you to read, but I just want you to see if you can find my little pointer there. It's not too big, but here's that tent of meeting area where inside you have the Holy of Holies, the ark, the veil, the altar of incense, and the lampstand, the holy place, the table of showbread, and the outer veil here. But down here, there's the altar. It's called the brazen altar on this map, but it's made of bronze, and it's the place where the animals are sacrificed. Notice it's almost the first thing you encounter when you come into the tabernacle courtyard. God is making a point that we should not miss, right? We need to pay attention to what God's doing here. Anyway, let's move on to finish the chapter. Command the Israelites to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, so that the lamps may be kept burning. Again, here's another requirement God institutes. In the tent of meeting outside the curtain that is in front of the testimony, Aaron and his sons are to keep the lamps burning before the Lord from evening till morning. This is a lasting ordinance among the Israelites for generations to come. Again, you remember the lampstand introduced to us in chapter 25. Now we're told that if the sun's not up, the lamps need to be on. The priesthood that's about to be instituted, Aaron and his sons, are required to keep these flames burning whenever it's dark. God brings us symbolically his presence in this tabernacle setting. It's amazing to see. It's amazing to see the detail God insists upon, but it helps us understand his character. He wants us to understand he is set apart. He is like no other, and that we are his servants. We're not giving him our opinions and our ideas. We're submitting to everything he says so that we can receive his salvation and be with him forever, as he has allowed us to understand and to know that he has paid for our sin and that we can be redeemed through Jesus Christ. Hold on to that. Be assured that you know the Lord today if you've bowed your heart before him, if you're walking in the power of his Spirit, the truth of his word today. I pray that God blesses you, church. Serve him well.